for people who are about to graduate, and also just serve as a resource through the entire application process. So today I'll go over and give a brief introduction of what the Peace Corps is and what the opportunities are post-graduation with the Peace Corps, as well as some of the benefits, and really just how to use Peace Corps in helping think about or plan your career, and do a little bit more long-term planning. And I'll also go over very briefly what's involved in the application process if you are interested. So this will be a lot of me talking. So if you do have questions, throughout the presentation, please feel free to just unmute yourselves and interrupt me with any of your questions. And if you're not comfortable sharing or asking questions here, again, I am on campus or virtually on campus all the time. So feel free to reach out to me at any point during the semester if you have any questions. Great. So just a little brief background about me and my relationship with Peace Corps. So I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and you'll see that RPCV. And I served in Nicaragua from 2013 to 2015 as an environmental education volunteer. So just a little background about the Peace Corps. It is a US federal agency with the goal of promoting world peace and friendship by fulfilling these three goals. The first goal is really about, helping our host countries and our partner countries with capacity building programs, really in areas that they feel they need. And so our host countries contact the Peace Corps and invite us there and to basically serve in areas that they feel they need extra capacity building or training. And the second two are really about cultural exchange. And so, the second one is really what happens when you're in service and in the Peace Corps in your host country, learning about their culture, as well as kind of promoting an understanding of Americans to your host country. So, Americans are just really diverse, and just creating a better understanding of American culture and American life and the diversity within it to your host country. And the third one really happens when you come back from the Peace Corps, and that's, that exchange when you are sharing your host country's culture and information back to your fellow peers within the US. So to apply to the Peace Corps, there's two main requirements, and that is to be a US citizen and at least 18 years old. There might be some additional requirements or at least desired skills depending on the specific program that you'll apply for, but those are kind of the two basic requirements for considering the Peace Corps. Here you'll see, just a few kind of statistics on the demographics of our volunteers to date. And I also will, when I get to the application portion, I'll get into a little bit of how COVID has impacted our applications and our programming. But yeah, so just, we've had over 225,000 volunteers to date. And, our volunteers range anywhere from 20 years old to 86 years old. I will say the majority of our volunteers are still within that kind of 20s, 30s range. But, we have a good number of mid-career professionals and especially retired professionals who choose to serve in the Peace Corps as well. So I wanted to clarify just a few of the programs that we have, and if you're doing some research online, might get a little bit confusing. So I will mostly be speaking about this first one, which is the Peace Corps Volunteer Program, and it's a 2-year program for anyone over 18 and a US citizen. And so it's 27 months total, which includes 3 months of in-country training and then 2 years of service, all within your host country. And there's also Peace Corps response that you might see. So these are shorter term assignments geared toward people who have already done the Peace Corps or highly skilled professionals with a certain number of years of experience with their field of expertise. And we also have the Global Health Service Partnership, and that's geared toward licensed medical professionals who would like to serve abroad. So there are 6 main program areas for our Peace Corps programs, and that will be agriculture, youth and development, education, environment, health, and community economic development. So when you apply for the Peace Corps, you would basically serve and have your main job in one of these 6 sectors. That being said, a lot of these sectors and a lot of the work that we do really overlap and intertwine with one another. So, like I said before, I was an environmental education volunteer, and so my main program area is the environment, but I also obviously have a lot of overlap with education and certainly youth and development, in addition to sprinkling of health and agriculture as well. So a lot of these projects are really touch upon multiple program areas. And in addition to your main program area and your kind of main job or project, you'll also have the opportunity for secondary projects depending on your community needs and your interests and skills. So there's a lot of areas to kind of work in, multiple program areas. And as long as you're just kind of finding that balance between what your community needs and where your skills lie. And so just a little, so again, COVID has definitely changed this map, but these were the most recent country programs that we were serving in. So I believe this map is from 2018. We were in about just over 60 countries globally. And so while we did have to evacuate everyone, our programs will still be within these regions. Just when we are able to open up each country program is going to be determined on a country by country basis. So, I would say, again, this is from 2018, but, within 2018, and these numbers have remained fairly consistent, about 20-ish% of our volunteers were in the Latin American Caribbean region. About 45% were in Africa and the Middle East, another 20-ish% in the Eastern Europe and Central Asian region, and a sprinkling of the other percentages in the rest of Asia, as well as the Pacific Islands. So just to give you a very broad overview of kind of where we were most currently operating. So now I'll give you just, a brief overview of kind of what the timeline of a Peace Corps volunteer life will be like. The difference is, So every Peace Corps volunteer experience is different and unique. And so I was an environmental education volunteer, and my main role was to integrate environmental education into primary and secondary schools. And so I would also do outside community projects with adults, but I mostly worked with youth and integrating some of these concepts and projects into their curriculum to actually do within their science classes. So we would build, school gardens, do organic gardening and composting, different recycling projects, kind of tree nurseries, just other restoration projects if they were interested in it, in addition to building, fuel efficient stoves and ovens. So those are just a sprinkling of some of the projects that I was involved in. And so when you become a volunteer, you go through PreService training, and that's 3 months. So, regardless of what country you end up in, you will go through an immersive language, cultural, and technical training depending on the program area that you are working in. So everyone kind of receives the same language and cultural training for their host country. Depending on the sector that you're in, though, your technical training and workshops will look a little bit different. So, you know, the health volunteers obviously have very different training from us, where we were learning about, you know, tree nurseries and building of fuel efficient stoves. They were learning about how to work with their local health centers, among many other things. But so this is a very immersive process within these 3 months. At the end of those 3 months, you are placed in your host, in your community site. And so that's still within your host country, but you are assigned to a different site. And that's where you'll be for the next 2 years. So during the first year, and Peace Corps really is a 2-year program because we emphasize, you know, really getting to know your community and integrating into your community during that first year. And that allows you to gain trust and, you know, basically get buy-in from your community to carry out the projects that you would like to do. So, and also really learn about what your community needs. And so all of that can be a fairly long process, and we really emphasize you know, spending time and taking the time to do that during the first year. So in year 1, you arrive at site and you get to know your community and some of their community's needs. And you might start planning some projects with your community and gaining momentum. But year 2 is really when your projects are kind of taking off and going full speed, and you kind of have a routine more in place. And so, and you know, by the end of the last half of that year, you're trying to wrap up your projects and we'll end service. So each, this is a photo of my, I guess cohort is the best word I can use, but you do go in with, you know, different cohorts where everyone arrives at the same time and goes through training with you. But then you are kind of separated to go into your different host communities within service. So then you're spread around the country. But your timeline is the same with the other members of your cohort. And then, you know, after your 2 years or 27 months, you do return home and you start fulfilling that third goal of Peace Corps, which is, you know, bringing some of that knowledge back to your peers and sharing that in the US. So some of the benefits of Peace Corps while you're in it, there you do receive a living stipend and housing for the entire time from training to the end of service. And the living stipend that you receive is typically comparable to that of a local salary. So my salary was probably comparable to like a local teacher in my town. You receive medical and dental coverage, so really all medical expenses and needs can be met through the Peace Corps office. You get all your prescriptions there. Any services that you need can be dealt with through them. And there's also possibilities for student loan deferment. And basically what that means is, well, this is different for every loan. This is mostly for federal loans, but there are some things you can do with private loans as well. But one of the benefits of Peace Corps is during that time that you're serving, you can defer or basically postpone payments on your loans until after you're done with your service. So that means like you can go abroad and you can have this experience without needing to make payments right away. So you will eventually, you know, have to make payments on them afterwards, but it is at least a nice reprieve and benefit of the Peace Corps. So you can basically postpone those payments until afterwards without accruing any additional fees or interest. So it's just kind of like a pause on those loans. You also receive vacation time, which you can take, you know, however you would like. You can go home if you're able to, or just use that to travel around your host country. So really your vacation time is yours to do what you would like during your Peace Corps service. And there's also a lot of career skills and training during the entire 2 years. So there's that pre-service training, but there's also mid-service training and training towards the end of towards your close of service. Where you'll receive just a lot of information and kind of career skills, workshops, and advice from the rest of the Peace Corps staff.
Stephanie, there are a few questions that came into the chat from the last slide and kind of what you've already shared. So someone was asking if folks are able to contact family while they're away, and are volunteers able to access mental health services as well?
Yeah, so the Peace Corps Medical Office does offer mental health services. What that looks like in country, I think, is a little bit different. Some countries you will have to go to the Peace Corps office, which is typically in the capital, but they do offer mental health services through the main medical office within your host country. The other question, contacting family. Yes, and it does depend. So, a lot of our sites, you can certainly contact family. You'll likely have access to your phones, whether you get good cell service or something. That's kind of the tricky part. I personally just had a little cell phone. I was able to text and call my family with minutes, which pretty regularly. And certainly when I went to internet cafes, I can email them and chat with them. And there's certain places with Wi-Fi. And I'll say that, so I left, in 2015, but I also know other more recent volunteers who had data and Wi-Fi in a lot more places than I did. So they could Skype and FaceTime with their family. So I think one of the, really incredible benefits of all the technological advances is that you can be in contact with your family pretty regularly while you're abroad. I think cell service definitely gets a little spotty because we do operate in some pretty rural areas. But that's not to say that you are completely cut off contact from your family for the 2 years. Everyone, finds certain ways to keep in contact with them. It might not be as often as you would like, but there's certainly multiple ways to contact them and get in contact pretty often.
Thank you.
I also had a question.
Sure.
So I was wondering how long the vacations were within the 2-year period.
So I'll have to get back to you on the specific number of days. I know it kind of accrues. So the longer you're there, the more vacation days you kind of rack up. And I think it's but it is a couple a month, but the exact number I'll have to double check on it. But I think over the 2 years, you would probably get a few weeks of vacation over time.
Cool. Any other questions that folks have from anything that Stephanie has shared so far? Feel free to add it in the chat or unmute yourself.
Yeah. Great. Well, I will keep going. But again, feel free to interrupt me at any point. So
Stephanie, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I think you just get the last slide. Yes, you didn't go over this.
Great, thank you. So, those were the benefits during service and some of the benefits after service. So you receive a little bit more than $8,000 in transition funds. There's a number of graduate school benefits, which I'll go over as well, in addition to professional networking and career services. I will say one of the biggest benefits that I've found being a returned Peace Corps volunteer is the network. Like I said before, we've had over 200,000 returned Peace Corps volunteers to date. And that's just a huge network of people and a really open community for both professional and personal purposes. When I moved to a different state in Colorado, when I moved here to Colorado, I feel like I can kind of immediately contact my returned Peace Corps volunteer community in the state and start connecting with people. And certainly there's just a lot of networking events run by our PCVs throughout the country. So great support network. And there's federal employment advantages. If you're looking to get into working with the federal government, and I'll go over that in more detail in a couple of slides as well. And there's the public service loan forgiveness. And so this is basically where if you work a certain number of years in public service, there's a couple other stipulations too, but the idea is that if you work a certain number of years in public service, you can ultimately have your federal loans forgiven, and Peace Corps counts towards those number of years that you need to have your loans forgiven. So if that is a path and you're looking into public service, then just know that like your 2+ years within Peace Corps would also kind of count toward the requirements that you would need to for the loan forgiveness program. Are there, I just saw in the chat, are there undergrad GPA academic requirements for to be considered for the Peace Corps? No, and I'll go into kind of the more nitty-gritty of the application process towards the end of this session as well. But the short answer is no. I would say most of the programs do highly prefer a bachelor's degree. And it's usually like a bachelor's degree or a certain number of years of work experience. I think since most of you are at CSU, I would assume most of you will have a bachelor's degree after a certain number of years here. But there's no like undergrad GPA requirement for the Peace Corps, and it's a very holistic application process in general. But I can go over that in more detail in just a little bit. And for the degree, it doesn't have to be in any specific field. Obviously, depending on the program area that you're wanting to apply for, having relevant either academic or work experience within that field, certainly is favorable to you in the application process, but there isn't a specific field or a specific degree that you have to apply.
I can answer the question about the recording. So this recording will be available for both Thrive program, STEM and Classic in the AEC website, in the recordings library. And then for Thrive-Grad, that will be also the same thing in the STEM designated page and in the Classic Thrive-Grad designated page in the library. So this will be most likely just in one of the categories of the recording. So just make sure to take a look at the AEC website by the end of the week for the recording.
Okay, so for some of the graduate school benefits, and this applies to, all returned Peace Corps volunteers, there's a lot of we have over 200 university degree partner programs, and essentially that gives you access to scholarships, financial aid, and funding for having done the Peace Corps. The level of funding and financial aid that each program offers differs and is dependent on the university program, but and I would say the majority of these school programs also waive the application fee if you're thinking about graduate school, which can certainly add up if you're applying to multiple graduate schools. So, these are just great options for, while not all of them cover everything, they certainly do offer a significant amount of aid for return to Peace Corps volunteers. And if you want to look at specific programs, and I'll also go through the website a little bit with you too, because I know it can be confusing to navigate. But if you went to the main program webpage, you can find under benefits here, and then there's another little tab over on the left side that you'll see to find out, what programs are actually participating and exactly what financial aid or scholarships they provide. This is, this can certainly change year to year. So, if you are in the process or thinking about actually applying to grad school, certainly double check with the kind of recruitment or financial aid office of that program, just to make sure that all the information has been updated. But you'll be able to scroll through and see exactly which programs and what degrees you would be able to get and the type of aid and support you can get for each one. And so a couple of slides ago, I mentioned that there were kind of federal job benefits. And so this is one of the I would say one of the best benefits of being a returned Peace Corps volunteer. So this is time limited. For a year after you finish up with the Peace Corps, you receive what we call non-competitive eligibility, or NCE. And this NCE status basically makes it easier for federal agencies to hire you because they know you've met certain minimum qualifications by having completed the Peace Corps. And so if you're looking into work with the federal government, a lot of our PCVs or Peace Corps volunteers kind of get their foot in the door with NCE from Peace Corps and AmeriCorps. And if you go to USA Jobs, which is where all federal government jobs are posted, you'll be able to check the Peace Corps box and see which ones are actually looking for this NCE status. There's actually some jobs, so in terms of giving you a leg up for applying to federal jobs, there's some jobs that only take applicants with NCE status. And in addition to that, if you were to apply to a job that was open to the public, then you would have your application looked at before the general public because of your NCE status. So it definitely gives you a boost in terms of the application process if you're looking to go into the federal government. And there's also, this is kind of the path I took. So if you're looking to go into more international work, Peace Corps is really a great stepping stone for anything within the international sector. A lot of my peers have gone into the State Department or worked with USAID or other implementers of USAID or international development programs like DAI. So it's a really great stepping stone because it gives you, firsthand field experience and hands-on experience, and it is very reputable among, the major international development companies and agencies like U.S. State Department. And for a lot, if you're looking to go into international work, there are some jobs that look for applicants or candidates who have experience living abroad for a certain amount of time. And certainly the Peace Corps kind of gives you that leg up and that opportunity to live and work abroad. Okay, so we'll jump into kind of the application process. So it's a pretty seamless process. It definitely is lengthier than most jobs, I will say. One of the things about the federal government is it's not exactly the speediest agency to work with, but everything is pretty clear. There's just a more waiting period in between the steps than other kind of private companies might do. But you'll be able to search openings, and I'll actually take you through the website so you can see where you would search for openings. But search for openings, the entire application is done online. And it's pretty self-explanatory, a form. I'll also go through a couple other application tips. You will then provide a health history form so we can understand the medical needs and make sure to match you with a host country and location that can meet those medical needs. You would then be selected for an interview, which is pretty much all remote interviews at this point. And once that is done, you'll receive an invitation with a place fit. So that will basically give you information on where you've been placed for your program area and your host country. And you can choose to accept or decline that invitation. And then once that goes through, you'll go through a medical and legal clearance. So they'll do, you'll have to get like a physical done and make sure you are up to date with any vaccinations that you might need to go abroad, and etc. And then a background check as well. And then there's some other onboarding materials, and then you depart for your host country. And so this is what the web page would be like for the volunteer openings right now. And to get into a little bit of how COVID has impacted our application process and our programming at large. So, March of last year, we did have to evacuate all of our volunteers. And we have been working on and evaluating on a country by country basis to see when it's safe to send our volunteers back out to each country program. So right now, because there's still some uncertainty around which programs exactly we can send volunteers to, we have essentially these positions within regions and estimated departure dates. So I would say this screenshot's a little bit old. Most of our departure dates are in 2022 at this point. And I think that's a much more realistic and optimistic time frame. So, over time, once we do get more clarity, you'll see actual countries popping up under the position description as well. But for the time being, since what we've done is essentially shifted it to this regional model, since we haven't gotten exactly which countries will be accepting volunteers next year. So right now we'll have like a pool of people interested, teaching high school math, in Africa, and then once country programs open up, then we'll be able to make that match and place someone who was interested in that region and in that sector, and based on their qualifications in their application as well. And the departure dates are estimations right now, so still subject to change, but I would say with the updated kind of volunteer openings, most of them are within 2022, and I think that's a much more reasonable time frame. And just as a little bit of background too, because this is a lengthy application process, which you saw on the last slide, even under non-pandemic circumstances, we recommend applying about 9 to 12 months before your desired departure date. So even before the delays in terms of, programming around COVID, we still recommend like submitting an application about, almost a year before you would like to leave. So that's also just something to consider. So in terms of thinking about 2022 departure dates, it doesn't seem too unusual for us at this point. There's a lot of these big apply now buttons that you'll see on the website for each position. And this one is for a specific position. It'll also ask you to create a login username, and then you'll be able to actually fill out the form online for the application. And if you're not set on a specific region or a specific program area, we also have this opportunity to apply where needed most. And that one's like the first one on the volunteer openings page, but that basically lets placement officers know that you're flexible in terms of what you want to do and where you would like to go, and they'll match your qualifications with the needs of their host country programs. So if you don't have any specific requirements, apply where needed most is kind of a great opportunity to demonstrate your flexibility and really just allow the placement officers to make the match based off of your qualifications. And so the application process itself will take about 45 minutes to an hour to fill out the form. And the form is pretty standard, just kind of background information. If you're applying to a specific position, then they'll ask you about your experience with certain skills. Like if you're applying for like the agricultural position, they'll ask you questions about how much experience you have with specific skills under the agriculture program, and your abilities under that program. But the form will take about an hour. You will also need to have a motivation statement, which is like a 500-word statement, and a resume ready. So that hour time frame isn't really taking into consideration the statement and resume. So that would be additional time before you actually went on to the online application. And then information for 3 references. And that's just information, contact information for 3 references. They don't need to write letters of recommendations for you at this time. Basically, you'll put their contact information in the form and they will receive like an online form to send in. So this is kind of what it would look like, what would pop up, but usually most for the 500-word essay or the motivation statement, really describing why you want to be a Peace Corps volunteer and how you plan on overcoming some of the challenges during service. So that's kind of just the submission box, but most candidates or applicants kind of do their motivation statement outside on a Word document and then just paste that in. And then for your references. So again, this is kind of what the reference submission part would look like in the application. You would need, you would need 3 references, and this is kind of, it can be anyone from this list, though this is kind of in the order of preference, would be current supervisors, current or previous supervisors for paid employment or work, from supervisors from volunteer work, professors or advisors, and then after that, a close friend. You can't have any relatives serve as a reference, and you can only have up to 1 friend serve as a reference. So the other 2 would need to be a mix of either professors, advisors, or previous supervisors for paid or non-paid opportunities that you've done. So just a couple kind of notes about, competitive applicants. So certainly they have relevant education and or experience. So while you don't necessarily need a specific bachelor's degree, certainly it does look favorable for you to have had relevant education or experience. And that can be, like, when we say experience, we really mean everything, all paid, non-paid, volunteer work, internships, coursework that you've done that might be relevant, like even if your degree itself is not within a specific field, or if you've taken courses or other trainings that might be relevant to that program, certainly put it on your resume and highlight that in your application. History of volunteerism and community involvement. So, the Peace Corps is about serving your community. So, we do like to see applicants who have been involved with their community, have done some community service work, and volunteered in their community. And there's no specific number, but just demonstrating that you have done that work before. Certainly tailor a professional resume, much like any job, just making sure that you've included all the relevant information and that it's been, edited and looks professional. I also do resume reviews during my advising appointments, and I also look at motivational statements if you need any feedback on those as well. Well-researched, so demonstrating, and this is from the application, the written application to the interview process, demonstrating that you've really done your homework and you've researched the Peace Corps and what the Peace Corps experience could be like, and really having a good understanding of that. Flexible, certainly now more than ever, but Peace Corps in general is an experience that requires a lot of flexibility, the ability to adapt to different situations. You could be living in a host country that has very different customs and a culture, and just demonstrating your ability to be flexible and to adapt to different scenarios is really important. I would say, if not the most important part of being a Peace Corps volunteer. applied early. So we also accept applications on a rolling basis. So if you're looking to go to a specific program, you know, the earlier you apply, the more likely you are to be accepted into that program. So that's always certainly beneficial for those if you know which program you would like to do. And, you know, just avoid common mistakes on your application. And that can be anything from not just even like little typos on your motivational statement or your resume, but also making sure that you've uploaded all the relevant documents or required documents, and just really making sure that all parts of your application are complete. And then kind of in that whole process, because it is a lengthy process, there might be things that you could miss, just making sure if you receive an email from the Peace Corps that you respond to them and respond with the whatever required documentation that you might need. And so this is also just on the right here is our virtual spring event flyer. So I also hold application workshops. Some of these have passed already, but in April, I'll be holding a couple application workshops. So if you are, you know, at that stage where you are looking into applying or have questions about it, I'll go through the entire application process, the online form itself, as well as answer any specific questions you might have about the application. Otherwise, I also just have office hours and advising appointments if you just want to chat about, you know, a specific opportunity or a specific position and kind of how your education or background might fit into some of the programs. So I'll go and share if I can find it. I was going to share the Peace Corps website just to kind of okay. Are you all able to see that?
No, we just see your presentation. If you pulled up like a website, it only shows what you originally shared, which is your PowerPoint. Okay, yeah.
Now? Okay, great. So this is the main Peace Corps webpage. And And here you'll see, if you're looking into volunteer opportunities, you'll see under this volunteer tab, which is really the main tab that you'll probably be looking at under volunteer openings here. And this is where you'll be able to explore all of the different openings that we have. If you went into a specific one, say youth and development, you'll see, you know, the apply buttons, etc., as well as the required skills and desired skills. So those are, right now, they are much more vague than they typically are, just because of the uncertainty around specific programs. But, you know, if you have questions, this is a good place to start to see, you know, what skills you would need to actually highlight within your application. And so you can certainly filter them by the area, any language requirements, or the region that you're looking into. We also accept some couples in some programs, couples who are either married or in domestic partnerships. And this is the first option that I mentioned before, serve where you are needed most. Again, that's just allowing placement officers to review your skills and preferences and match that with an opening versus applying to a specific position like one of these. So if you have a bit more flexibility, that's the serve where you are needed most option is a great one to have. And then if you want more, this is like the general program information here. And if you go over to the benefits area in this tab, and then see university programs down here. And you can kind of click on really any one of these, but the Coverdell Fellows Program is when you would actually see the participating schools. And so you'll be able to kind of scroll through all the degree options, and then under each page, they will note how much it would cost. Yeah, so there's a lot of information, and if you are trying to do some research or want a better idea of what Peace Corps life is like, which helps with the motivation statement, I would recommend going to the Stories tab up here, and this is really a compilation of a lot of different stories, blog posts written by Peace Corps volunteers of successes, challenges that they've faced, adjusting to a new culture, environment. You can find information on specific projects that different volunteers have done around the world. So if you're not quite sure what an agriculture volunteer might do, you can click on these stories by sector and then start filtering through different stories to find projects that, but I mean, the stories really span everything from kind of, just in how each individual has adjusted to their new life or new culture, all the way to just their projects or the application process. And it's a lot of information, but I think it's really helpful to get a better sense of what Peace Corps life is like. You can also sort by country. So if you're interested in specific countries and you want to get a better idea of what that life in that country is like, then also a great place to read a little bit more. Okay, so I mean, that was a lot of just me talking. So if there's any other questions, let me go back to the.
Yeah, do folks have any questions about, yes, I was just gonna say in terms of like following up with Stephanie, like how they can find this resource within Education Abroad to like further get support, even if you're thinking about it later on or now. Do folks have any questions?
I wanted to ask specifically to your experience, what's something you would have done differently kind of going in to the program?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if I would have done it differently just because the whole process is a learning experience. But I might have wanted to do a little bit more research on some of the projects that I could have done within the country and started like planning a little bit earlier. And I say, like, I could have done that a little differently and gotten some projects started earlier, but at the same time, part of this whole process is going in and getting to know your community more, before you actually start doing all of that. But in general, I think it would have been doing a little bit more research on different projects, and also just, I think now looking back, there's certain community members I feel like I should have reached out to earlier within my Peace Corps service who would have been really great resources. And eventually I got in touch with them, but kind of later on in my service. So I think really doing more work to kind of do that outreach when I first got there. And I say that and I say I could have done that differently, but would I have? I don't know. I think one of the best things that this experience has forced me to do is to be more open and to connect with communities. And honestly, I went there started my Peace Corps service as a super, super shy introvert. And so the idea of like me just going out into, you know, a community and connecting with strangers was absolutely terrifying to me. So while I think it would have been nice to connect with them earlier than I did, I just don't know in terms of whether that was right for me at that time, or, you know, I would feel comfortable now, but, you know, at that moment, I probably would have done the exact same thing. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
And just to remind folks, all this information for like the university webpage is found under Education Abroad. The link that is on this page is what that leads you to. And you just look up Peace Corps and it gives you more information about the workshops that Stephanie was talking about earlier that are going to be taking place later in the semester as well.
Yeah. And if you can't make any of those info sessions, again, you know, you can always like look at my availability on Navigate to book an advising appointment, and we can go through really specific questions that you have about what might be a good fit for you.
Any other questions from folks? I just posted that link that you have on your presentation here in the chat for folks to look at. That's where Stephanie's information is, that Navigate link to schedule something with Stephanie as well. So it's all in this page for folks to continue looking at after this presentation. Any tips for students who are thinking about it down the road? Stephanie, I mean, I'm sure that a ton of your presentation already included that, but anything that you want to leave for students to think about?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it is like a pretty big commitment. So it seems like really daunting to go away for 2 years. And I certainly, and I think it gets less daunting the more you talk with people and the more you kind of do your research and see, you know, where Peace Corps can take you. And yeah, I think really just doing a lot of research and a lot of homework. And I know that can be, there's so much information out there on the website itself through people, you know, returned Peace Corps volunteers can probably like blabber on about their experience for hours on end. But there's certainly not a lack of returned Peace Corps volunteers willing to share information with you. So, you know, feel free to reach out and just get as much information as you can. And in terms of the application process, kind of, you know, if this is something that you are thinking about and after graduation, I think just thinking about the long-term benefits, like the career benefits, the graduate school benefits, if that's something that you want to consider. I think it's some of those things that seem really far down the line, but are really important to consider earlier than later. And then, you know, I think it would pretty much anything that you would do to strengthen your application for the Peace Corps will help you with any other job search as well. So, you know, if you're wanting to do the Peace Corps and you think you need to do more volunteerism or community work, honestly, all of those experiences and getting more experience within those fields are going to be beneficial for your application with any other job application, regardless of whether you end up deciding to apply to the Peace Corps or not. But yeah, I think I'm certainly biased, but I think it's a great experience that, you know, really has helped and shaped me professionally and really personally. I think I've just grown personally so much throughout this experience. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, for sharing. And thank you, folks, for being here. I know that we posted a few links on here for a pre-evaluation and then a post. Remember that for students who are in the Thrive programs, there's only one CLIF evaluation. Make sure you're doing either the STEM or the classic one. For folks who are in Thrive-Grad, make sure you do the post-evaluation for either STEM or classic. And you can find those in the designated web pages. But just please let me know if you have any questions. I'll hang out here for a little bit for folks who have any questions. Stephanie, if you have like a couple minutes, folks want to hang back, but I'll stay here and I'm going to stop recording.